What's up, everybody? Welcome to Minding My Business. Every single Tuesday, I go live with a powerhouse guest. You are going to love today's guest. She is a powerhouse. She is just changing the game, and it's an honor to be able to introduce her. But make sure that every single Tuesday you come on Minding My Business, where we just get to celebrate women that have created a lane for themselves, and you get to learn how to elevate your business, your mindset, and your life. And I have Tessa here right now. All right, Tessa Bella. I think I have you right here. I just added you again. Let me know that you got on. Hello, beautiful lady.
Hello, how are you?
Good. It was so amazing to see you in person the last few days. I always love like being in your energy. I couldn't believe it was like already a year.
I know. It honestly is wild to think about how much time has gone past since we've been in the same place, but it was so great just to be around. I've always loved events for a number of reasons, but being around people that share some of the same like drive, passion, and excitement, as I do is always one of my favorite things. So it definitely was amazing.
I know. So I tried to look at your Instagram to give you a nice little intro, but all I saw was like Money Mentor Tessa. So I know you do so much more than that, but I think, you're a motivation on your own. You are living the life of being a leader, being the example. You're always growing, you're always expanding, and you're always trying to. I think anybody that comes in your presence, they're gonna be able to attest to this, that you really do build people up. Not only do you build businesses up, but you build people up. And it's just such an admirable trait. And that's something I've always really admired. And I've been chasing to get you on this podcast for like, I don't know, probably since it started like a year ago. So, is there anything you want to add for what you're currently doing? I mean, all I had was Money Mentor Tessa.
I know. It's actually funny because Instagram has always been one of my favorite places to connect and network. And,
Yeah.
Obviously it's been a massive tool in business for me, but I had lost so much like excitement around Instagram for the longest time that it, is not like a main platform that I spend nearly as much time on as I once did. So it is a little bit fast on my Instagram bio at the moment, but I think that was a great way to summarize really my involvement. I've done a number of different things in my life. Obviously, I have a couple of my own businesses. I've invested in many things. I've invested in real estate, but I also support a lot of other businesses, either as sort of a fractional CMO figure who's stepping in and helping them see things from a different scope of how they can really get in front of the right people, or simply being sort of that operational mind. I think I definitely hold a lot of the keys of like that integrator mentality, so I can really bring a vision to life for other people. And to me is a lot of fun because you learn a lot by doing and being able to experience different business models, different dynamics, different people. It's such a powerful tool. And then the money mentor part does come in because I love making, managing, and multiplying money and teaching others how to do it. Certainly did not come from any sort of wealthy background. I've been homeless. I've had the whole ups and downs of life. And so being able to show people that it's reality, it's realistic, it's something that you can do regardless of the, position you're in now, really, really excites me probably more than anything.
Yeah. What got you into, because I feel like you were kind of getting into that now, but this show is to celebrate the woman who's created a lane for herself so that others can feel elevated and inspired and give hope. But like what got you into this industry or this line of work?
Yeah, so it's I'll try to give kind of the cliff notes here, but I actually was just working at a coffee shop. I was the manager of a coffee shop here in Arizona. I had just moved down here from Oregon. And, I was going to college, working multiple jobs, just trying to kind of figure out what I was doing and where I belonged in this world. And one of the few things I did in my downtime was I loved watching like flip shows on HGTV. I know it's kind of silly, but I thought they were just absolutely, it captured my attention. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever to take something that was, seemingly broken, forgotten about, damaged, destroyed, and turning it into this beautiful thing. And I've always loved the comparison of like a water bottle at a gas station is $1 and at the airport is $15. So it's so much more about the value that you see and that you place on something. I think that applies to people. I think that applies to property. I think it applies to everything. And so I really fell in love with that whole concept and had a very scrappy start. I got my first keys to a property to flip when I had negative 36 cents in my own bank account, but I was like, I'm going to figure out how to do this, and made it happen. And so I got very quickly immersed in the world of real estate investing, real estate sales, and I think that's sort of the gateway to entrepreneurship as a whole.
Yeah, and it's really I say like I'm drawn to like strong, not only like strong individuals, but I feel like there's not as many strong, empowered women that really do want to see other, not only women, but human beings like win at life. And I mean, you just have that trait. And so it's really something to be admired. And I think just by you talking about it, and if you guys aren't catching on, like Tessa's in the people investment industry, which is ultimately how you make money. So you kind of have applied it to really all the different paths that you've taken on because you own multiple different businesses and you're involved in multiple different investments and you're successful from my understanding in any industry you decide that you're going to choose to be in.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. Everything's a people business, I think, at the end of the day. Even ones where you're hiding behind a computer, there's still a degree of understanding human desires. There's a degree of understanding the psychology behind interacting with people. Even if that's just your one, desk mate at your office, there's a lot that goes into understanding who people are, how they operate, what motivates them. And to me, especially as someone, which this comes as a surprise to some people, but I'm naturally very introverted. Like I tend to be very shy, kind of quiet. But when I, immerse myself in a community and really try to form like meaningful and intentional connections with people, that's when I started to see things open up for me. I was like, okay, yes, you can go, you can go decently far by yourself, but you're never going to sustainably get the success that you want, even in just a personal level, without truly opening up and letting other people, into your world and building those relationships. And so it was a learning curve for me, but I've become obsessed with it ever since. And it does translate into any industry, in my opinion.
And actually talking about that, like, there's work behind the work. Like I see you put in the work in your training. I know you're all about your nutrition and, like there's work behind the work. And so what would you say some of your daily non-negotiables are, like your daily habits and rituals and routines are that allow you to build up the strength you need being an introvert, stepping into a very extroverted industry and just consistently showing up because you're so consistent in everything that you're doing and that's really like the secret sauce. So what are your daily non-negotiables? What are your daily habits that make you strong and capable?
Well, thank you. First of all, that's one of my favorite pieces of feedback to receive is the consistency because I have definitely, committed to a lot of things over the last 6+ years of my life, and I'm a big believer in playing the long game. So the consistency is a big piece of that. As far as daily non-negotiables, it obviously ebbs and flows a little bit for the seasons that I'm in, right? But for me, movement is absolutely crucial. I've actually changed that verbiage in my own life because I used to say a workout is non-negotiable. And I had this very militant way of I was at the gym at 4:30 every morning workout, and I did that for many seasons of my life. And though I still like to do that, and I do oftentimes, go get a hard workout early in the morning, changing that verbiage in my own head to movement has been a lot more freeing because with anything, one of the two of the most paralyzing, feelings for a human is guilt and shame. And you don't realize that you can cause that on yourself. And so movement is a big piece. Giving myself the grace to also do what feels right at that time. If I'm sick and feeling really under the weather, it's going to be going for a walk or just kind of sitting and moving my body rather than putting it under more stress than it needs to be. So movement is a big one. Mindfulness for me, I always spend at least 30 minutes to an hour each day And that usually encompasses like prayer, meditation, journaling, and sometimes I incorporate some reading or listening to something at that same time. And that's just because I believe the physical health and the mental are equally important. You cannot truly have one without the other. So those pieces are essential. And then I would say the other thing, which there's a lot of pieces to my routines, right? But one that's an absolute non-negotiable is definitely having your boundaries and honoring them. I have this phrase that I love that's you get successful by what you say no, or you get successful by what you say yes to. You stay successful by what you say no to. And so, of course, in the beginning, there was some power to say yes and putting myself in every room, every opportunity, everything I could, to quickly build my knowledge and experience. But then as I've continued to grow, you only stay at that level of excellence. And I'm pretty sure you're on the same page with this as well. If you have boundaries and you honor them. And I was so scared to start setting those for the longest time and realized shortly after that people really respect that in most cases. And if they don't, that's a great indicator of somebody that you probably don't want to work with. So I think especially for someone who tends to be a bit more introverted, setting those expectations, those boundaries, and holding to it is so important. For example, I could push myself to go into a social setting and just stick it out and do all this kind of stuff. But if I know my energy is tanking and it is really not a good place for me to be, is it best for me to force myself through it and they're not going to get the true best version of me? Or is it better to honor my boundaries and make sure that I'm always showing up as the best person that I can? So I think that those are some of the three probably biggest non-negotiables is that movement, mindfulness, and then boundaries.
I love that because that's also protecting your energy. And I think people don't really talk a lot about energy shielding, energy protecting, and respecting your energy. Wait, can you say that again? You said you get successful to saying yes, and then you keep success. You said it. It was beautifully said. I was like, oh, hold on, let me type this.
Yeah, it's that you get successful by the things you say yes to, and you stay successful by the things that you say no to.
That was a diamond right there. I mean, everything you're saying is a diamond for sure. What would you say, like you talked about tanking and being able to give everything that you can, the best of you versus what's left of you? What would you say, when you're yellow lighting? I like to kind of use it as a light system. We're red lighting when it's too late. We're yellow lighting kind of when you're explaining it, you're feeling you're off, you're not at your peak. And then green is you're thriving. So when you're yellow lighting, what tools do you use to get you back up into the green? Because we know that burnout is a really big thing that isn't heavily discussed when it comes to entrepreneurship and wanting to achieve so much stuff. But at the end of the day, entrepreneurs get burnt out because they don't know how to have that I guess prioritizing that self-care. So what are some tools you use when you're yellow lighting?
Yeah, I actually have one of my favorite tools, I guess, is I have this note in my phone and it's titled My Happy Checklist. And it started actually when I was in a really dark, challenging season of my life where I was kind of struggling to find much happiness in my days at all. And I had a unique year. It was the start of 2020, ironically. I was always big on setting up all my vision board and tons of goals and all this stuff. And 2020, I went into that year because I was coming out of a really challenging season. And I said, hey, my sole goal this year is to find joy in every single day. It doesn't mean that every day is going to be perfect and so amazing, but to find something to be joyful and happy about within every single day. And so I created this happy checklist on my phone, and some of those things are large, some of them take time, and some of them is really simple. It could be a song that gets me in a different state of being. It could be simply getting up and moving my body a little bit. There's this one strip of properties I like to drive by, things like that. Just I have this running list of my kind of happy checklist. And so if I have, the opportunity, I typically will go to that list and find at least 1 to 3 things that I could do quickly to kind of change my state because I find that makes the biggest difference. If I'm actually in a setting, however, say for instance at an event and I could feel that happening, I noticed that even just going off for a slight bit of isolation, that could be in a bathroom stall. I've definitely done that before, where you just need a minute, right? You just need to isolate for a second and kind of breathe through it and really analyze how you're feeling, what's going on, and what needs to change, and making sure that you're aware too if there's anything else that is contributing to that. Like, am I hungry? Am I exhausted? Like, is there anything else outside sources that I can kind of tap into to give myself potentially the best springboard, to be a better version of myself. But then on the larger scale too, because you did mention burnout for entrepreneurs, which I do believe in, I think it's super important to have reset. I do a 90-day reset at the bare minimum every 90 days. I go pretty much off grid for at least 24 to 48 hours. And I mean, I prep my teams, I prep my workers, friends, all that stuff, but I just disconnect and I use that to revisit with myself, to do all the things that make me feel good. It's supposed to be fully disconnected from anything work related, and it's just solely to kind of like get back to centered and grounded and make sure that also the actions I take on a daily basis do align with what I want my life to look like. Because I think we get really caught up, especially with entrepreneurs, doing a little bit of everything, and sometimes you don't stop to look at and realize, hey, these may be productive, but is it productive in alignment with the goals that I've set for myself? Or am I just sort of filling my plate with busyness, to feel like I'm checking stuff off the list?
And I love the transparency and the tools that you're giving these resources to others that might, like, everybody really needs them. I'm like, oh, I want a happy list. Because people talk about gratitude, but I like how you said my happy checklist, because I feel like people have a very hard time. I had a hard time for a long time. It would make me angry thinking about gratitude because I couldn't tap into that. And then, like you talked about, the shame and the judgment that comes along with it of like, why can't I feel gratitude? I'm a bad person. But I like how you said my happy checklist. And I think that was really beautifully put. When you feel like when do you know this is I feel like a lot of people have challenge with this one, but when you know like it's time to change, because you mentioned several times about season, like what season I'm in. How do you know when it's time to shift seasons and when to pivot out of something that no longer serves you?
That is an amazing question. I think that, it definitely comes down to being in touch with yourself. I think a lot of times we just kind of take society's input on how we should feel or what we should want, any given time, rather than truly what that looks like for us. And I love just like empowering people and reminding them that you have so much freedom of choice in that. Like, there's no timeline or time frame for which you need to make a certain amount or be married or do, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
A lot of times there's so many outside pressures that kind of impact us, on that front. So I think that that's definitely a big piece of it, in my opinion. But the other thing that I would say is I like to do frequent reflection. I think that we definitely have a lot of talk out there about goal setting, vision, all of this kind of stuff. There's not a lot of talk, in my opinion, about structured with key metrics like reflection. So 2 tools that I utilize. Number one, within my relationship, we do what's called a life dinner every end of the month. And that life dinner, like, we go through pieces of our life separately and together in a reflection of the previous month. And so we ask the same couple questions every single time. We have a great discussion about it. And of course, it also ends with like, how are you feeling? How can I support you? What's something we can do with intention going forward into the next month? So I do that in my relationship, but I do the same thing with my life. I go through and do kind of that wheel of life, and I actually give myself a numerical score on how I feel about and
This
what
one?
I'm accomplishing. Oh yes, see, exactly. I knew that we're on the same page on that.
Yeah, just so you guys can see what she's talking about, that each part of your life is subcategorized so you can give it a score and a rating. So yeah, I was like, oh, hold on, let me grab my mine's right here.
So I rate that every single month. I do an actual score, and I think a great way to think about it is like, hey, if I have, if I'm really high on my scores, or at least congruent on my scores of, career, finances, and my physical health, but my family relationships is really depleted. Imagine it like a bike wheel, and that spoke is broken, and it's dented right there. You're not going to be able, like, you can still kind of push it for a little while, but at some point, like, that wheel is no longer going to keep spinning, and you're not going to be able to move in the direction you want to. And so it truly many people, and that's often what leads to, then our burnout and getting into a situation where it's harder to make that change. I always encourage people to make the change, cut things off, or make the pivot, before you get to that point of literally like feeling like it's life or death. Because when your back is against the wall, you may not be making the true best decision for yourself. You're making it out of like a state of desperation. Nobody wants to be operating out of a state of like, I have to get out of this, or I have to get out of here. It's much better done when you're at a more elevated kind of like awareness of yourself. So I think that piece is definitely crucial to understand. And I also, I had a friend that told me one time that I've always held on to this. And he said, not every opportunity is your opportunity. And that one really hit me because I tend to be the person that you probably do too. I get approached regularly of people, come start this business with me or grow this with me or let's collaborate or, invest in this or let's do this. I get no shortage of those kind of opportunities. And I struggle to be able to analyze which ones to take advantage of, how to kind of put up a wall on things that weren't going to be best serving of that. And so that phrase, not every opportunity is your opportunity, it was so freeing because it's like, now I can make those choices based off what I actually know is going to align better with what life I want, the finances I want, the people I want to be around, the morality of everything that I'm doing versus just, I don't want to pass this by because it is an opportunity. So I think that the more clear you can get on what life looks like and what that, means for you, it makes it easier to filter your decisions and then having awareness of, what has happened to date as well.
Let me ask you this. You're super successful when people see the whole outside, and it also sounds like the inside as well. And I think it's just people get confused, I think, in the space of building or trying to achieve, like you just talked about, getting clear on the type of life they want to establish. When getting to the space that you're at right now, right? Because I always say built, not made. You're built. Every day you're building yourself. It's work behind the work. Would you say your net worth impacts your self-worth, or that your self-worth impacts your net worth?
Ooh, wow. That is a great question. I would like to say that I believe your self-worth definitely impacts your worth because I have seen it firsthand that if you don't believe you're worthy of that income and that money and that success, it can exit as quickly as it came. I was a prime testimony of that. In the beginning of my start in real estate, I had some quick success and I felt great about it, but I had no idea how much I severe imposter syndrome. I had a horrible relationship with money, all this kind of stuff. And so I pushed it away about as quickly as I made it. And that forced me to quickly refocus. But at the same time, one thing that I do think is important to note is I've seen a lot of people make seemingly out of character decisions when their net worth or their finances are severely depleted. And so I'm going to go with self-worth impacting net worth, but I do think that it also comes down to being able to detach your self-worth from the finances that you have currently and where you're headed. Because I can know I'm a great person, I can know I have amazing things going on, and that success is headed for me, but I'm not there yet. And that's not going to damage my self-worth. It's, if anything, going to make me believe in myself even more.
Yeah. So speaking of this, because I think what you're also saying is having, because you mentioned about your character, being out of character, and when you're looking, so did you watch the Whitney Houston movie? Did you get to watch that?
Okay. No, I haven't.
But you know the story, right? Whitney OD'd, but she was literally legendary. I mean, her music's still being played. And that came down to if you watch the movie, you see she was on good track, and then all of a sudden the person she chose as her partner, her father, her ecosystem was toxic, and eventually that ecosystem brought her down into destruction. So when it comes to creating a strong ecosystem, your inner circle of people, what type of core values do you look for? Because they say you are who you surround yourself with, and it's 100% true. But what core values do you look for right now or moving forward to make sure that you're supported and you're growing and you're expanding so that you have a really enriched ecosystem?
Ooh, okay, so there's a book on this that I absolutely love called The Values Factor. Have you ever read that book?
No, I'm going to get it now.
Yes, that is personally one of my favorite reads for personal discovery, but also for like leading others, because it talks about how to identify what your values truly are and how to identify those in other people and how that kind of relates to our motivators and all that kind of stuff. So great read. But I definitely place a very, very high priority on being around people that always emphasize transparency and honesty, even if that doesn't feel good to the ego. I think that a lot of people want truth and honesty and transparency, but that doesn't always mean that it's a good thing. Sometimes it hurts, but I like to be surrounded by people that empower me and that I empower to give true, honest feedback. Obviously with consideration to feelings and whatnot, but I think that's how you continue to grow. And if you have people surrounding yourself that don't accept honesty and feedback, then it's hard to grow. And I've always believed this to be true, whether it's for relationships or friendships. You start somewhat like this with someone, right? Mm-hmm. You're going to be somewhat parallel to one another when you first meet, because you probably had some sort of similarity or some sort of attraction. At that point, you're always going to be moving forward on this trajectory of life. But if one person's committed to growth and learning and evolving and the other remains the same, it starts as a small issue and all of a sudden you're miles apart from one another because there was a disconnect there. So I like to have people in my life for the long haul. And so it's very important to me that they are committed to growth. They're open to feedback. They love to connect and, truly get that impact and like feedback, I guess, from other people around them so that we can grow at a similar rate rather than growing apart, because I think that happens very, very often. So that would be a big piece of it. And then, the other was a long time I was stuck in sort of the hustle grind mentality, and I failed to create space or surround myself with enough people that simply enjoyed having fun and like the true quality of like laughing and feeling good and enjoying this life that we're building. I was so wrapped up in like, oh, you just gotta grind early and then you can enjoy it later on. And fortunately, I found a couple of friends at that time that really helped me to rewrite that narrative. So I believe that's a big, big benefit as well, is like, however you want to phrase it, people that prioritize living life and actually take the time, to differentiate that, to integrate it as best you can in what you're doing throughout your daily operation, but, never forgetting to live and enjoy and laugh and just like do the things that make you feel good, whatever that is, because we don't have a lot of time here. We might as well make the most of it. You're never going to truly get to that point where you're like, oh, I've made it, now I can have fun. Mm-hmm. And if you do, then you probably don't have many people around you anymore that, want to go have that fun with you. So I think that those two are probably my biggest priorities in the people that I surround myself with.
Yeah, and I will say I love seeing your stories and you're reposting a lot and your friends, and then you're playing golf, and I'm like, you're the first person that, and I played ice hockey, so like the movement of golf is like very similar, but I was like, when I saw you play golf, I was like, she makes it look so fun. I want to pick up golf now. And then I was like, oh, she just looks like the coolest friend to have. And so it's just interesting because you really do, like, people watch and keep up with your lifestyle and your stories. Like, you really are who you say you are. Like, you're just having a blast. Like, I was like, oh, I want to go golfing now, or you guys are hanging out, and you do carve out that time for your inner circle. Now, I got to meet your honey bunny, and before you attracted him, did you have like also core values with getting into an intimate relationship?
1,000%. And it's actually funny. We have quite the story. It's even best to hear from him because we've known each other. We met in like a work setting a couple years ago, and fortunately, he was very respectful of the fact to not like overstep that, because it happens. We've all been there where the person you meet in a professional dynamic thinks, oh, I'm going to try and make the move. He fortunately did not do that, but we ended up forming, obviously, first a great working relationship, and we had always stayed in contact, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we loved to talk about was I actually posted about reading the book I suggested earlier, The Values Factor. He took that suggestion and read it, and we had this great conversation about like what some of those values were that we both held. So it is funny how that comes full circle as well. But I definitely did. I dated my fair share of, frogs on my way to finding one that truly is an amazing partner for me. And in each case, many great people, many great things to learn from. I was very aware of, what felt right and what I knew I needed in a partner. And I really love taking notes. So I had a note where I was always kind of contributing to that of like, hey, this is what I aspire to have. This is really important to me. This is how I want to also feel as a partner. That's the other huge thing is like, and we could go all in on different energies, but I believe when you're with someone who really holds that strong masculine energy, it allows you to be a lot softer and be in your feminine. And for me, as somebody who in my career a lot of times has to be more alpha and more masculine at times in how I interact in a business sense, it's like the weight of the world lifted off of me when I am in a relationship that allows me to soften. And so that was a huge value for me. But yes, I've got a running list. And it's not the things of like, hey, he's got to be this tall or look this way or anything like that. I care less. I did look out because I think he's incredible, but it was so much more around who you are as a person and how you allow me to feel and what we're able to create together. So I definitely did document that.
I'm glad that you said that too, because I feel like a lot of women are being like, man, I've had my fair share of conversations, but I'm so grateful that I'm certain in who I am. And I feel like a lot of women can get caught up in the space of manipulation, trying to be a strong woman, run a business, and being like, oh, you have your guard up. Well, yeah, my guard up because it's not safe for me to put it down. And when you're around a true male, not from ego, but in his divine masculine, energetically, you mentioned energetically, it allows you to feel safe to step into the divine feminine. So I'm so happy you touched on that, because I think a lot of men go around just because you're making a lot of money doesn't mean you are in your divine masculine or that you actually are projecting like a strong male. Typically, it's a form of insecurity if you have to rely getting back into like self-worth being weighed on your net worth.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And I think the other thing too, right, is I had relationships in the past where maybe I was feeling comfortable to be in that feminine energy, but I scared for them to see that other part of me. So I think that's equally important, right, is that somebody can also, hold their own and respect that there are times when I am going to step into, somewhat of this different energy if you're seeing me or hearing me interact on a business sense. So one of his favorite stories when we first moved in, I was like organizing a spice cabinet, putting everything these cute like labels and all this stuff. Meanwhile, I'm on the phone, just absolutely like going to town on somebody to get something done. And he was like, I've never seen somebody who's being a homemaker and like decorating our cute cabinet while also like negotiating multi-million-dollar deals and making stuff happen. So being able to like, straddle that difference and comfortably navigate both sides, I think is also super important.
What would you say as far as like, it's just so funny. What would you say as far as like, I think this is another one too that, cause remember the show is more for like women. We love our men being here. I think you're going to get a lot of value out of it, but especially women who are looking to really elevate their business, their mindset in their life. When you are attracting people like friends, relationships, scaling your business, scaling your life, there's a segment where what did you have to overcome in order to become her?
Yeah, there were a lot of things I definitely had to overcome. I would say the most powerful kind of overarching is that two things. Number one, you write your own identity. And so long we go through life, I think especially females, but really everybody, having their identity assigned to them based on the other people they've interacted with or the situations or circumstances they came from. For example, I grew up in a dirty little trailer park in Southern California. I had for the first 10 plus years of my life been labeled as someone who was poor and broke and, a weirdo and dirty and all this kind of stuff. And I went through, into my adulthood still wearing some of that identity that other people had written for me. And of course, through all the seasons of my life, I started to collect all of these other labels that I allowed somebody else or another circumstance to kind of place on me. And I think the biggest thing is knowing that you take that pen back. You get to control the narrative, and you're not just, deemed somebody because of an activity they have assigned or placed on you. You get to control that story. And when you take that power back and really, really start to understand that, that helps me overcome so much. Even, I earlier said here, I said, I tend to be more introverted and shy. That in itself is a label that I still hide behind at times, right? It definitely is part of just my chemical makeup. I prefer to be, a little isolated, but I need to be careful that that's not, becoming just a piece of the identity that I walk out and express. So that piece I think is really huge, is not hiding behind those falsities, whether you gave them to yourself or someone else gave them to you. Is just absolutely so important. And I would say the other piece of navigating that is, really trying to stay connected with the fact that, here's the thing, I have a deep story, right? There's a lot of trauma there. There's a lot of things unlocked. I don't enjoy telling it, not because it triggered me or upsets me. In fact, I've done a lot of healing, and I love to share it for the benefit of other people. The reason I don't like to share it is because that's not necessarily unique, in the sense that so many people have a story. Nobody's exempt from or immune to hard times and challenges and people mistreating them. Everybody has an experience there. And so the piece to me that's the most important to understand is that your traumas and the things that hurt you, they're not your fault, but they are your responsibility. That to me was probably one of the biggest things to overcome. Is it's easy to say, oh, well, he hurt me, or she did this, or they screwed me over here, and hide behind that, rather than saying, whatever happened, it's not my fault, but it is absolutely my responsibility to react to this, how I come out of it, and how I choose to, let that affect me not going forward.
That's so powerful. So as you're talking about, like, you write your own identity, yes. What identity are you writing, stepping into your next level upgrade?
Ooh, that's a great one. Well,
aren't these fun questions? Like, they're so fascinating. I always look forward to hearing.
That really make you think.
Yeah.
I would say a big identity for me, and this is one that's allowed me to also create these filters of who and what I like to be associated with, is, I always want to be known as the person who does what they say they're going to do, and who is just wildly committed and reliable. And at times there's a lot of factors, right, that get out of your control in that sense. I think especially the bigger you get in business, you now understand that you have multiple people that also represent and can affect that outcome. So that's a really important factor for me, is, that identity of being the consistent person, the one that will always do the right thing, advocate for the right people, and just be extremely wholeheartedly myself is very important. And another identity, I think, which this one's a hard one, but I think you'll relate to me on this a little bit, is I love to try and paint that balance of being, extremely successful and accomplished and having, a great work ethic and commitment, with also being gentle and fun and enjoying peaceful lifestyle. And so often those things don't seem to coexist in the minds of most. And I would love to be able to continue to help paint that picture as well, that you can, have and be both. You don't just have to be one or the other.
Yeah, no, I mean, this morning it was my yoga, my beach. You guys see me rollerblading all over the place. Like, you travel all the time. I was like, I travel around the streets rollerblading to the beach. That's about it. Besides once every 2 months. No, it's really important to have that. But I think that's what makes you so charged up and authentically you. is making sure you never lose those pieces, as you mentioned, that are part of your happy checklist, and that you don't say like, I'll do it later, because that's like saying I'll do life later. And you get confused, like you're a human being before you're a business.
1,000%. And I think we create those limits on ourselves more often than not. Most of the time, if you effectively communicate some of those things, 99% of the time that will be very much appreciated, acknowledged, and often will even result in something better down the road. So I think we put those false pressures on ourselves from time to time of like, no, I have to do it all right now, instead of just, enjoying the journey. It's so funny too, most of the things that many people desire in life and a lot of the things that we push for and shoot for, it's not a matter of winning it. For example, if you have a great marriage, that's not something that you win at one day. That's something that's an ongoing journey. Same thing with a great business and the success that you've accomplished. There's never just one day where you stand up on the podium and collect a trophy and it's like, cool, it's done, goodbye, we're good. So most everything, whereas health is another great example. Everything that most people desire is long game. And there's not going to just be one day that it's like, oh, my health is good enough, time to stop pursuing, great health. And so I think
it's been real.
The journey is so important. Yeah, it's so much more important.
Yeah, and I love that too. Like you're like, okay, in this season I was in the gym a lot. Now I know you travel a lot. How are you able to prioritize yourself with the season you're in right now of traveling so much?
Yes, I will say that definitely poses its challenges. Like, I love my routine, and we try to keep the most consistency in like similarity of our routine, even on the road. So it's still, getting workouts in, or at least going for walks, still eating, similarly to how we do when we're at home. Things like that definitely helps. I always think it all comes down to how you prepare, and I also I live and die by a schedule. I'm a big schedule kind of gal. Even if that schedule blocks of nothing, at least it's blocked out, right? So that things can't just take up my calendar without my permission to do so. And so I also try to really make sure that even when traveling, I am operating off of a calendar or schedule, and I'm blocking out things accordingly to stay as close to my routines as possible.
Do you put yourself in, because I know entrepreneurs have a very hard time prioritizing themselves. And I think it's also come to the segment of like valuing yourself and knowing that you are the most important person in your life in order for your business to operate at heightened levels of success. But like, do you block even like your time off in your schedule?
1,000%. I have things like that 90-day reset. It's pre-blocked in my calendar. I try to take on Mondays. I try not to take any calls because Mondays I used to just get bombarded with my calendar with like call after call after call, and it was not a good workflow for me. And so my whole Monday's blocked that nobody can just book an appointment on a Monday. And then I've got like my time blocks in the morning of that routine of working out and mindfulness and all these kind of things. I'm a big believer in not having empty space on your calendar because you start to lose control of it really quickly, especially as an entrepreneur. A couple people a year even saying, hey, can I grab a spot on your calendar? That can quickly turn into, I'm not in control of my time, and ultimately your time is your energy. And if I'm just being, used and taking advantage in that, I created that problem. And so I think that blocking it out is a must.
So I'm curious on this. What is like your number one success tip with like time blocking in your calendar?
I would say
because let me say this first, because here's the thing. With our personality traits of like wanting to be rebellious and craving freedom, right? Because we work so hard for an end goal of freedom, but we also need structure because structure equals order. So creating a calendar, what I've realized talking to a lot of successful entrepreneurs is they can end up becoming resentful towards it. So like if that's also like a tricky thing, do you ever, like with that being said, now go ahead and answer the question.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I love the book and System 12 operated for probably 6+ years now. And it allows me to be extremely productive, but more so than anything, it really emphasizes not focusing on more than like 3 things at a time, as far as like big rocks in your business or in your life even. And I think we just attempt to do way too much all at once, which leads to always feeling like you're behind or not doing things as well as they should be, things like that, which again goes back to those feelings of like guilt and shame and letting yourself down. And so I try to always operate off that system where I just have like 3 big key things that I work from, break those down into weekly and daily tasks, and then delegate them accordingly and kind of like lock them into my calendar. And once you get good at running a system like that, you realize you can get a lot done in a lot less time and a lot more, even less of your own time than you initially realized. Like there's a lot of things that's happening behind the scenes with my team that's working towards one of the goals I've outlined, but that doesn't require me to be glued to my computer, 24/7. And so I'm a big believer in systems and delegation and just getting like super streamlined and focused. And that 12-week year system has always been my favorite way to do so.
Do you have like a set timeline of even strategizing? Because I know a lot of people also talk about like they think all of a sudden it's created like within a minute, but strategizing, getting clear, and then reverse engineering it can sometimes take time. So when you're structuring out your 12-week, how much time do you typically block out for that? I mean, are those time blocks on its own?
Yeah, I typically try to do so around that 90-day reset. So what that looks like for me is like on that 90-day reset, the end of March is my first one of the year. I personally go to Sedona because I just love it there. It's the most amazing place in my opinion. But I go up there and, a lot of it is about recharging, disconnecting, but it's also revisiting goals, making sure that that's still in alignment, like looking at if I set a vision or a big goal from the beginning of the year, are we still in alignment with that? Has anything changed? What's our progress? So there's the point of reflection, and then that's typically when I adjust for my next 12 weeks. And that always looks like pretty much a full day, and part of that day, I'm sure you could condense it if you are time sensitive, but part of that is like enjoying it, living the life that I'm creating. So that morning needs to be like just peaceful and everything that I can imagine. And then it's like getting into the feeling of looking at the photos of my life and what I've written and what I've heard and talking to people, and then sitting down and like strategically mapping it out. Probably doesn't take more than an hour or two in reality of actually getting it on paper. If you're clear up here, that's probably where it gets hung up is, we may not have full clarity yet on what's going on.
I love that you added that because that's definitely one of the big things when I talk to people is they're not clear and there's a lot of fog. And actually more people are foggy than they are clear.
I agree. I think part of that comes from there's no real rule or guidelines of how to set that goal or those visions, at least outside of the traditional, right? Many people have an income goal or maybe a, fitness goal or certain ones, but when you get into like your spiritual health or your mental health or things, it's much harder to put just a set metric on, I'm going to, cure depression this year. I'm going to, get closer in my relationship with God this year. Those are still loose goals, right? That's not something that's very finite where it is with, your career could say, hey, I'm going to get 10 new clients. Check that off. In these other areas, the construct of what you're shooting for is a lot less measurable, on like actual check. I think that's part of why people struggle to get so clear.
Yeah. And also too, I mean, well, what I think as well, I don't know if this has always been a part of your lifestyle, but, working with people in that area of performance, it's because they're not taking care of themselves. So if you're disconnected and numbing your body, you're going to be dulling your mind, which is going to block out your vision. And that's why you're struggling in business. It's a reflection of every area of life. But I found that to be the key thing because I realized when people start taking care of themselves, and you mentioned like your non-negotiables, your prayer, your devotion, your journaling, like these are daily habits that you've established that allow you to continue to have the clarity, to have the vision, to keep going, to get back up when you fall down. And a lot of people don't have self-care structure.
Yeah.
A lot of people.
Yeah, I like to think about routines ultimately raises the level of your defaults. Because again, I said nobody's immune to challenges, hard times, heartbreak, all these kind of things. We're not exempt from that. Anyone is susceptible to those things happening essentially at any time. But if you've elevated the quality of your defaults to now be above average, that means that even when I am struggling and hurt and lost, my default operation, because of the routines I put in place, is still even higher than the average person, and so I bounce back faster. And I've always felt that that's one of the key factors of a successful individual is, it's not that you have less problems. If anything, you probably have more that you're dealing with. You just get better at bouncing back faster because you've elevated, to a new height with your routines and things like that.
Yeah, amen to that for sure. I couldn't agree more with you. And so, oh man, I just love talking to you. I don't think I've ever talked to you like this before. We just kind of interacted a few times, but I knew there was an energy, a synergy, energy synergy. But if you could leave the audience with one big takeaway that if they integrate it on a day-by-day basis will completely change their life. It could be a quote, it could be, advice, just like dropping a diamond on them for them to just do one thing.
Oh, the Italian in me cannot do one thing. I'm like, I want to give all of the things, so I'm trying to find.
But if we give all the things, they're going to get overwhelmed and do nothing.
Yes. Okay. I think, and this is very much in alignment with everything we talked about here today. I think that the most important thing, and often overlooked, it's not fun, it's not glamorous, but adding in more intentional points of reflection in your life, at least monthly, if not more frequently. I like to do a Sunday reflection even, where I'm kind of looking not just forward and what's coming, but so important to look back at what has happened and what has worked, because I think a lot of times you may get stuck in this loop and you don't even realize that you're in a loop, but it's because you're not reflecting on the fact that, so much of your time is spent doing the wrong things or around bad people or just not respecting, the boundaries that you've outlined for yourself. So I think my one biggest thing would be to implement more intentional reflection and progression of how that then applies going forward, and that will change everything for you.
So kind of like a weekly audit of a life audit.
And I have a structure of doing so. Like, I operate off the same questions and the same scale that I rate myself on every single week. So there's plenty you can find online, but I would just encourage people to have the same points of reflection each week. Of course, if you want to expand on stuff, go ahead and journal on that too or whatnot, but having some sort of consistent metrics that you're measuring each week so that you can see true growth, or, if I can see, hey, my mental health is consistently on a decline for 3 weeks in a row, I probably need to take some more serious action to change that around before it becomes this massive issue that I can't change.
Will you share some of yours with us?
Yes, of course. So similarly to the Wheel of Life, I do go through it. I give myself kind of a reflection on how I prioritize each area of that. And again, it's a rolling thing. So then I go through with that same key, and I'm setting some sort of intention or goal or task around each of those areas, or I call them the equities of life. And that can be something simple. It can be, getting that movement, or it can be something very granular, an exact task or thing I want to check off a couple times that week. So that's a big piece of it. And then it comes down to the questions of overall, how did I feel about the past week? For me, one of my top priorities is to have peaceful mornings. I love a feeling of just a peaceful morning, not feeling like I wake up and instantly gotta check emails, gotta do this stuff. My first couple hours of my day are sacred to me. And so I'm like, how many times was I able to stay in that state and prioritize and operate within my boundaries rather than, just pushing out to this, outside world controlling it. I think the biggest piece there is, taking as much control of the controllables that you can, rather than just letting life kind of push you around, because with so much going on and so many things to focus on these days, it's easy to get sucked into kind of just going with the flow of life rather than actually controlling what that looks like a bit for yourself.
Yeah, I love that you said that, taking control of the controllables.
Yep, that's essential. But also knowing you can't control everything. So there's some you just got to be able to roll with, but there's a lot within your control.
I love it. Wow, what a conversation. So many diamonds. Huh?
This has been amazing. You're a great interviewer. I love these questions.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was like, I just want you to have fun and then just like speak your truth. And this is really for, other women that are maybe not, they're in a space, and they want to elevate. And I think the advice you've given was just so valuable and knowledgeable, where it's going to give hope to a lot of people. And men love listening to this stuff too. We love our men coming on, but this really is for our ladies, and also to celebrate you, Tessa. I think you're just an amazing human being, not only beautiful but intelligent and just very powerful. And you're a leader in it, and it's really an honor to know you. And thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's such amazing, like, words of affirmation. Just tickles me. But I mean, I feel blessed that we were able to connect.
Yeah.
A couple years back now it was, and just like form these kinds of relationships are essential. So I appreciate you having me, and this was absolutely amazing.
Thank you. And I think somebody had asked earlier, like, just the name of the book again, with a value book, because you dropped 2 books in here. You dropped.
Yeah, the values factor is the first one. That'll help you understand the clarity around what your values are and how that operates in your life. And then the second is the 12-week year. That just explains the system of how I like to operate my life, kind of a summary. It's just very streamlined way of doing it.
Mm-hmm. So thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you guys so much for watching live on Minding My Business, where we're here to elevate your business, your mindset, and your life. Make sure you go head over to Tessa, give her some love. We will be saving this video, so make sure this is free. We just give our time to add more value to the community. Make sure you drop a comment below. You like this post, you share this post, you screenshot it, tag myself, tag Tessa, and we will make sure we recognize you and we acknowledge you. Thank you for all the love. Thank you for your guys' time. We value you so much. And stay tuned for next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Oh, I'm still on here, you guys. I was so caught